want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today, Fogham, where you can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
Happy New Year! Welcome to the voice of AAU. I know it's been a long time. I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. I hope everyone had a safe and happy New Year. And I want to welcome all my guests back today. And it's been a interesting New Year, very interesting New Year. Um, I know that a lot of us out there are kind of surprised. We had a great coming in, and now we're here. And so today, I'm really excited. We have 3 wonderful guests today as we talk about attack on Capitol, on the Capitol. So we're going to really, and as you guys know, we usually start this show with a little video. So I want to welcome you, Dr. Yvette Butler, your host, and my co-host.
I'm invisible, the invisible man. Happy New
Then,
Year.
so yes, and many of you thought you were going to see him this year, but probably not. Probably mid-year, we'll see what happens. You might get introduced to the Invisible Man by face and just won't see me. So we are excited about this topic today. And as you know, we always start our show off with a little video to set the stage, and then we introduce our guests. So I'll tell you a little about our guests. I'll say who they are, and then we're going to show our video, and then I'll go into a little bit of their bios. And remember, this is a live show, so you can call in. Lines will be open at 7:15, so you can start calling at 7:15. Lines will be open, but we're really excited to welcome back Dr. Joseph Silver Jr. Senior. Also, we have our our wonderful, very, very knowledgeable. These are some unbelievable young men and women that we have on today, and I'm excited because we usually have men, so we have an addition today. So I'm really excited about it. We also have our own and my very own delegate from District 20, Janelle Wilkins. And so wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. And then lastly, but now I says, but also historian, who knows a lot about what we're going to talk about today. We have also Judge Murphy. He likes to be called Billy. So, and we also have Judge Murphy joining us again. So I want to thank you and welcome you all to the show. But before I do a quick bio on everyone, I want to show you and set the stage actually for what we're going to talk about today. So can we show this real quick clipping, um, so people can get a feel of what we're going to talk about today? The video, please.
We thank our valiant law enforcement officers who are true American heroes. What we saw yesterday was a group of violent rioters undermining the legitimate First Amendment rights of the many thousands who came to peacefully have their voices heard in our nation's capital. Those who violently besieged our capital are the opposite of everything this administration stands for. The core value of our administration is the idea that all citizens have the right to live in safety, peace, and freedom. Those who are working in this building are working to ensure an orderly transition of power. Now it is time for America to unite, to come together, to reject the violence that we have seen. We are one American people under God. Thank you very much.
Okay, so probably most of you have not seen that clipping. We've seen a lot on TV, but we haven't seen that one. So I'm going to introduce my guests, and then I want each of our guests. We're gonna try to keep actually everything in your response to about 2 minutes, because we have a lot of folks and a lot of questions to get to about today's topic. So first, I want to introduce Joseph Silver. Joseph Silver Sr. And I want to thank you so much, Dr. Silver. Thank you so much for coming on again. He has been on our show a couple of times before. As you know, Dr. Silver is the president of Silver and Associates, a full-time educational consulting firm, also focused on accreditation, strategic planning, board development, and change management. But one thing to really know about Dr. Silver, and this is why I say, and I'm excited that when he comes on this show, because Dr. Silver actually was the president of Alabama State University, the provost and vice president of affairs of Clark Atlanta University, the vice president. He has an unbelievable history. The vice president of academic affairs for Savannah State University, the assistant vice chancellor for academic affairs at the University Systems of Georgia, and an administrator and professor of political science. And I never can say this, Kisney or Kinsey. You have to say that one for me. Kinsney. I always get that wrong. Kennesaw State University. He is a well-renowned educator and leader in the academic arena. But quickly, I want Dr. Silver. I won't go all to his history because he has an illustrious history. Please click on the link that was sent out to you if you want to find out more about him. But Dr. Silver, can you tell us in about 2 minutes? Wednesday was a day after we had a day on Tuesday in your state of Georgia, where we had an unbelievable election where we got two Democrats in, a Jew and also an African American, which never has been in the history of Georgia. And then we had our wonderful day on Wednesday when we saw our capital under attack. Can you please just tell us a little about what you thought about that?
Well, thank you, Dr. Butler, first for having me on again. I do agree with you that it was a tale of two cities. We saw the great work that was put in to elect two senators from Georgia that would effectively change the landscape in the Senate. The ground game was tremendous. A lot of folk put in the time to make sure that the election would go the way that it ended up. There was a lot on the line. And then the very next day, before we could even celebrate those victories, we saw the insurrection on the Capitol. The interesting thing about it is that folk are acting surprised. This was just a matter of time. It was an attack on democracy. It was an attack on everything that we think is sacred. And now we have these folk who are revisionists in real time trying to act like something different happened, including the clip we just saw. But the bottom line is that it was an insurrection. It was something that was incited by the president. And it is my hope that we see swift action for all those who were involved in that coup, attempted coup, including the President of the United States. I'll have more to say as you finish introducing the guests.
Thank you so much. Next, we have my very own delegate, Janelle Wilkins, Delegate 20, District 20, I should say, from the state of Maryland. For those of you who are from other states and out of the country watching us tonight, she is the delegate for District 20 in Montgomery County, Maryland. Janelle, could you introduce yourself really quickly because I don't have your bio, and I want to thank you so much for coming on today. It's such a short notice, and we're excited to have you and excited to have another female on here. So can you tell us a little bit more about your background and also tell us, what do you thought? What are some of your thoughts on Wednesday?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Butler, for having me on. Again, everyone, I am Janelle Wilkins. I'm a state delegate representing District 20 in Maryland, which is the Silver Spring and Tacoma Park and White Oak areas of our state. I've been serving, this will be my fourth year now, and I'm also the parliamentarian of the House of Delegates. I was in Kingston, Jamaica, and so I'm an immigrant to this country and bring a lot of those experiences into the work that I do. I work full-time also at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, which is the nation's oldest and largest civil and human rights organization, coalition. And I think that coming from the advocacy background and working full-time in advocacy, but also being at the table as a legislator, it truly has been a week when we talk about this attack on the Capitol. And I appreciate, though, Dr. Butler, that you were really talking about the full day. I think that we have to remember the wins that we are celebrating that morning, many of which were led when we talk about Georgia and the work that was led by people all across the country, but years of organizing in Georgia, a lot of that work also led by Black women and that victory that Georgia brought us for the country. And also the nomination of women of color that day to be in the seat of power when it comes to the office of the Attorney General, who will help bring justice to our country and fairness and restore confidence when it comes to the Attorney General's office. One of those women nominated is my boss, Vanita Gupta, who is the president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and will be the next Associate Attorney General. So I wanted to lift that up. But in terms of the attack on the Capitol, I think that the NAACP said it best in this tweet that they put out. And it was very simple. They said, "We have been killed for less." And when I read that, it just struck me in my heart, because I think that for a lot of us Black people in America, watching what was taking place and what was allowed to occur, I felt like I was grieving both for the nation and our democracy, but also grieving and feeling resentful and angry because it showed once again the two Americas, the two justice systems, the two types of treatment that Black people and other people receive in this country. So I'll stop there for now, but I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. We last but not least, we have Judge Murphy, who likes to be called Billy Murphy, who is a former judge in Baltimore City. And so, Judge Murphy, I would like for you to just really tell us. Well, first I have to say he's a founding member or founder member of Murphy, Falcon and Murphy's attorney firm, and so it is a firm that has actually represented clients, at the top and highest level, and won cases in the millions of dollars. And when we say millions, we're up to 60, 50 millions of dollars, won various cases. So, Judge Murphy, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, but really tell us what your thoughts are about what happened on Wednesday?
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here again. This is a wonderful program. I'm particularly happy to see Janelle. Janelle has been an outstanding member of our House of Delegates in her first 4-year term. And we are like family in the sense that she used to work for my sister and she used to work for Vanita Gupta. And those are two excellent Black women. And that leads me to what I think ought to be the theme of tonight. This was a victory that we won because of Black women. There's no mistake about it. Black men contributed fractionally compared to the yeoman efforts of Black women, not just in Georgia, but all over the country, to deliver this tremendous victory. And I felt like a survivor of post-traumatic stress disorder because when this assault on the cabinet took place, I was in real fear. Fear that I had never experienced before because we were about to see a coup. We were about to see a House of legislation, our Congress, occupied, and people put in fear of death for it to be done. People were killed. There were 4 deaths as a result of this, and there may be more before it's over. This was an outrageous attempt to subvert democracy led by, hopefully, a person who will be kicked out of office within the next 2 weeks, Donald Trump. He led this mob. He exhorted this mob to violence. He had been doing this for most of his term. He did it certainly beginning with the run-up to the election. He kept telling people how illegitimate this election was going to be, and he was a cancer on this democracy of ours, a democracy that we all believe should survive and prosper, notwithstanding people who are traitors like Donald Trump is. Now, let's call it like it is. He's a traitor. He led a seditious outbreak to collapse our government. He declared falsely that this was a rigged election. He lied incessantly about it. He has supporters who believe every word he says without question. When he posits a conspiracy, they adopt that conspiracy. When he says something false has happened, it is true to them. When he tells them what to do, they do it. It's like a dictator in a banana republic who has captivated his supporters in ways that we have never seen before. We'd have to go back at least 150 years to look at an analogy. And the closest thing to it is the run-up to the Civil War in this country. And the closest thing to it in other places is like Nazi Germany, where we saw what Hitler did to arouse the passions of the German people, so that ultimately they took over their legislative branch, the Reichstag. And that was the first shot fired in what became Nazi Germany. And so these things are terrifying to me because I don't put anything past his supporters, and I certainly don't put anything past him. And so what we saw
this
was
is not the end of it.
attempt at an insurrection, and he ought to be run out of town on a rail. I support any means for him to be delegitimized by impeachment or by invocating the 24th or invoking the 24th Amendment to the United
25th
States
Amendment.
Constitution, which says that when a president is unfit, according to a majority of his cabinet, they can recommend his removal. It's up to the vice president to adopt that recommendation, and then it goes to the Congress.
Okay, Dr. Butler, I think
ratification.
that was the 25th Amendment. The
Yes.
25th.
25th Amendment.
So yeah, it is. It's the 25th Amendment,
25,
and I don't. We don't see that happening. So, I'm hoping that Congress would do their job on Monday. Because as far as the impeachment process. So, I mean, I think that day was a day that really alarmed everyone. Um, I was very surprised. Now I have to say, I stayed up all night Tuesday, and literally I could not go to sleep until I saw both candidates in the running, and then I said as in the head. So I went to sleep about maybe 3:30 and woke up to the rally. So thinking about that, what now? And it was disturbing for me, but I want us to really think about what impact will this attack have? Because remember, we have to say today, our President Biden coming in. I won't say President-elect. I'm gonna say President Biden because he is President Biden to me now. And since he was elected, he said he's going to establish a Black agenda. So tell us, what impact did this attack on Capitol Hill, if any, has on the Black agenda for this country in general and for our state and also our various places, locality, for example, for Georgia. So I want to first have Dr. Silver jump in and tell me a little bit about what do you think what impact this will have?
I kind of think as we saw what transpired on the television, I thought back to the Selma situation in which police dogs were put on to Black people to bite them, to deter them from their march. We wouldn't have believed that had not we seen it on television. And it's the same situation with what we saw on television a couple of days ago. Who would have believed that the citadel of democracy would have been invaded, taken over? But the sad thing was that we did not see the pushback that we saw during the peaceful protests with Black Lives Matter. So one of the things that we learned is that, or what the situation reinforced, is that we still have a dual system of justice, a dual system of how things are being reported. And we also saw some things that were disturbing because allegedly there were some of the Capitol Police officers who allowed some of this to take place, opening doors for the rioters, taking selfies with them and what have you. So I'm hoping that what we would see as a result of this would be really to push President Biden to have a Black agenda, but also for us to be ever vigilant in terms of understanding that we should not give any of those folk a bye. We should, in infinity rate, listen to what we saw and react to what we saw. And 6 senators voted to not legitimize the election, 140 representatives. We should remember them by name and make sure that they are either forced to resign or that we have opposition against them when they run for election. But the other thing that I'm hoping that we would do, and what this country would do, is, as the judge has indicated, to get rid of this president by any means necessary. I do believe that the call for a second impeachment is part of a strategy, hoping that he will resign. But if he doesn't resign, then I think the Congress should take their action. Whether or not the Senate will go along with it, I don't know. But if the trial goes along until after January 20th, it may be a different ball game. It just puts President Biden in a bad situation to start in a divisive mode when he's trying to heal the country. But we cannot let this go by. And he's trying to, he meaning number 45, is trying to say it would disrupt the country. It would create more division. If we believe in democracy, then there is no way in the world we can let this go by without harsh and immediate punishment. We have to do something.
Well, I'm going to quickly roll over to our legislative piece here, since we have a legislator on. Janelle, I want to ask you a question, and I want to thank you very much for that response. And also, if anyone else wants to respond to some of the other questions, but I want to get to how can a Black legislator, a political person as you are right now, and in a leadership position, how can we capitalize, or how can we utilize this opportunity? And I want to say, because I look at this opportunity, because it showed a real major difference of how we've been treated, and people have been denying it forever. But this effect, when this, when I looked at that, I kind of was unnerved about how I looked at the marches from this summer, the peaceful demonstrations from this summer, how they were treated versus a mob of terrorists were treated that didn't look like us. How can we, or how can you, as a political leadership, how can you use this to help push our agenda, and what, how can you help it, and how can it benefit us?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Butler. That's a great question. So as a legislator, one of the top things on my mind is that in Maryland, we are going back into legislative session to introduce our bills and debate policy next week. And no matter where the listening audience is from, if you're in the United States, you have a legislature that is either in office, in session, or going into session very shortly. Over the summer, we've organized, we've protested, we've made demands around racial justice, around policing, and so many different issues. And now is the time for your elected officials, particularly your state legislators, to make good on those promises. So yes, as a Black elected official, I'm at the table. I'm introducing legislation from discrimination in schools to qualified immunity for police officers, and legislation that runs the gamut. But we also need the public to be engaged no matter where you live, and pushing to make sure that your elected officials, as they go into session, are prioritizing these issues. So not only are we in this moment around what we just saw this week, but this entire pandemic has devastated Black communities. We've seen the need for immediate housing justice, the need around economic equality and healthcare access, and how all of these issues have come together to really fuel this pandemic in particular communities. So what I really want to lift up and share with the listening audience is that we have an opportunity that is either started now in your states and in your communities, or will be starting, where we have to ensure that legislators are prioritizing these critical issues. And what happened this week is just another reminder of the inequalities and the opportunity that we have to let that fuel and drive momentum for change, policy change in particular.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to shift gears, and remember, any of the questions that we ask, you guys can jump in on it. So, Judge Murphy, I want to ask now. We know that there's white supremacists around the globe. We saw that firsthand on Wednesday. And now, as these white supremacists are out there, and let me ask, who's involved in the attack on Capitol Hill? Do you think, and how can we neutralize, in looking at our communities around the country, because these people came from across the country, how can we operate with this type of environment, and what are some strategies that we should use to neutralize their agenda and their programs?
Well, one of the things that the Supreme Court did, and by the way, before I start talking, Dr. Silver, you have such incredible credentials, and I want to praise you to the height of praise for all that you have done to educate Black students, Black people, Black adults. You are truly excellent at what you do, and thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be on the program with you.
Thank you, sir.
When we look around the country, and we look at the numbers first, Donald Trump's supporters are in the vast majority of the American electorate. We won this election in the popular vote by about 5 million, 6 million votes. I haven't looked at the latest numbers. It was overwhelming. But yet, because we have a Supreme Court appointed by Trump in large measure that said that they're no longer able jurisdictionally to deal with gerrymandering, we have all these state legislatures that are controlled by Republicans who are actually in the minority of the population. They've been working on this and they succeeded getting it done for the past 20 years. So we have to pass legislation in the Congress against gerrymandering. If the Supreme Court won't deal with it as a matter of constitutional entitlement, one of the highest level priorities we ought to have is to get rid of gerrymandering nationally, make it illegal. The second thing that we have to do is restore voting rights. We've got to restore the Voting Rights Act. We may even have to strengthen it this time around. Because as you can see from this last election, we would not have had change if our right to vote had been so seriously impaired that it would have reduced our numbers. And there's every reason to believe that it did reduce our numbers, but we woke up thanks to the black women on the ground all over this country, the Latino women on the ground in the Southwest and in Florida. Latinos rose up as well. And so if that had not happened, we would still be behind because we have had voter suppression as a result of this past 4 years of Donald Trump. And it's been legalized voter suppression by, again, the same Supreme Court. So one of the things that we have to work on is that. Another thing we have to work on is our infrastructure, putting people back to work. There are highways that have to be repaired. There are bridges that have to be rebuilt. There are all kinds of physical structures in this country that can put Americans back to work. And Joe Biden has to be encouraged to come up with a budget.
Going off what we're supposed to be talking about. We're talking about what happened the other day. Let's get back to the
no, she asked me a question about what could be done.
You've gone over time. Let's go on.
Well, okay.
I want to interject this.
No problem.
In 1972, there was the Black Agenda at the Gary Convention, the Gary Declaration, Black Politics and Black Crossroads. And in it, they said, under the subtitle, White Realities, Black Choice, it says, the American system does not work for the masses of our people, and it cannot be made to work without radical, fundamental change. Indeed, this system does not really work in favor of the humanity of anyone in America. And as we began talking, we were talking about how the people who went into the nation's capital that didn't look like us, how they were treated. So let's stick to the issue. Let's talk about the reality. And I want to throw out what Curtis Mayfield said. If you had a choice of colors, which one would you choose?
Yeah. Let me chime in on that, if you don't mind.
Let me make one
even though we have a situation.
Before you do, Dr. Silver, let me make one remark in response. Now, Invisible Man, you know I love you. And if we don't do something about gerrymandering, we're not going to retake this country on a state and local level, which is essential to our progress. If we don't do something about voter suppression, our power could be limited and they can be successful this time around in the local legislatures to tighten their grip on state legislatures all over the country. And that's organized, systematic racism to deprive us of power. And much of what we have to do to promote the Black agenda is on the state and local level. And if we don't do that, if we depend solely on the federal government, we'll be giving up a tremendous amount of our power. Now, I already spoke to the issue of this being an attempted coup, but I want to point out one other thing. For the first time, many of these Republicans and all of the Democrats had to face the prospect of imminent death. The Congress was shut down. There was widespread panic. The invaders got into the Congress, took over the floor, went into congressional offices. This was traumatic to them. They will never forget this. And that's why they're in the mood to get rid of this president.
I think one of the things that we need to think about is
would not have happened but for that.
I think one of the things we need to think about is making sure that what we saw is not going to be revised as it relates from a revisionist historical standpoint. And people are already trying to do that. As I look at Tucker on Fox, as I look at Lindsey Graham today, Ted Cruz and Holly, they're putting a whole different spin on what we saw with our own eyes. And what we saw were individuals who took over the Capitol. They had their swastikas, they had the Confederate flag, they had their white supremacist symbols, and it was clear. It was clear what their roles were. But the thing that we cannot lose sight on is that before they came to take over the Capitol, they were incited by Don Trump Jr., by Rudy Giuliani, and by number 45 himself. We cannot lose sight on that, because this has been stoking, and in my opening remarks, I was saying we shouldn't be surprised, because from day one, number 45 has been stoking this. And for him to have 75 plus million people believe that he won an election that everybody know that he didn't, my point is that we cannot let this slide by because 12 days are left on his term. They showed that there is a difference in policing. They showed the utter disdain for Black people, and when you juxtapose what we saw in DC versus what we saw in the Black Lives Matter movement. I had a friend of mine to tell me that and this was a person who's white, a dear friend of mine. He said, had that been Black people doing that, we've been going to funerals, we've been seeing dead people. And what I'm simply saying, and I appreciate the assembly person who's on the call with us, because she's exactly right. We demanded a lot during the summer. Now it's time for action. And she's exactly right. Yeah. We cannot take this sitting down, and everybody should be putting pressure on the local media, the legislators, and every other entity to say, we will not let this go by, and we will deal with it from a unified standpoint.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I was actually getting ready to get back to Janelle on this, because I wanted Janelle to chime in on, because this can happen anywhere. It happened at the Capitol, but it can happen in Annapolis. It can happen at any state level. And this happened at the federal level. We know that we have white supremacists in this state of Maryland as well, just as they are across the country. What precautions, or what some of the things that you as a legislator, you're thinking about doing to change legislation locally so something like this cannot happen here or any other place, state, county, locally? Janelle, can you talk about that, or have you guys even thought about it yet?
Your microphone's off.
We have.
Whoops, there we go. One of the ways that we've been thinking about white supremacy, and I think is absolutely critical for us to address this issue, is how white supremacy has really permeated some of our police departments, and where we have seen evidence, and even in the situation that occurred, the attack on the Capitol, that police officers were some of the insurgents who were attacking the Capitol. And it's so critical that we root out in our own police departments people who are joining the force who are also members of these white supremacist organizations. So what that can look like is having deeper background checks, is having higher standards in the way that we are hiring our officers, and that we're having checkpoints along the way as well. So that's a part of the conversation that we're having when it comes to white supremacy at the state and local level. And I also want to point out, building on the last question, that over the summer during the pandemic, I had a constituent, his name is Fanon Berhe, And he was going through a mental health crisis in the midst of this pandemic. He was a recent University of Maryland graduate. I know you're aware of this, Dr. Butler, because you live in the community and are very engaged and was present for a lot of the aftermath of this. His family, during the mental health crisis that he was having, called the police, and an officer came, guns blazing. And Fanon Berhe had a knife in his hand, and he was immediately shot and killed within seconds. And ever since Wednesday, I think about Fanon almost every day, but ever since Wednesday, one of the things that I think about is that it seems to be absolutely impossible for officers to figure out how to diffuse situations and to figure out how to not kill Black people, except in circumstances where it's white terrorists attacking the Capitol, or the attack on the Michigan governor, or the many, many examples that we have. So I really wanted to point out that another lesson learned, and something that we have to really make sure we lift up in this conversation, is that never again should we think that it's okay, that the excuse is that, oh, this person had a knife, they shouldn't have talked back, or whatever the other excuses that are used, that we have that same amount of grace and the ability of officers to diffuse situations. So I really just wanted to lift up Fanon, who I keep thinking about so much in the aftermath, in particular around this attack on the Capitol.
Now, Janelle, I'm sure all of you remember a scene out of the what happened in the Capitol yesterday, where the officers tried to reason with people who were trying to break into the Congress. And so instead of putting them under arrest or telling them back off, they engaged them in conversation. And we see this all the time as the favorite technique when one human being is talking to another. Now, we don't get regarded as human beings. We're subhuman beings. And so we're not entitled to that. The first response is always force. With them, it's conversation. You can be strapped. There are films all over the internet of how white folks in the same situation with long guns, machine guns, all kinds of automatic weapons, they get a conversation from the police.
Mm-hmm.
But when a Black man does the exact same thing, is surrounded with all kinds of police cars, guns pointed at him, et cetera, et cetera. So there's clearly a double standard, and we have to root out racism. So one of the things we have to do is make racist behavior more criminal, more in a much wider sense of the word, and penalties against racism much more severe. And it's not just hate crimes. It's racist behavior wherever it exists, especially organized racism. And that's one of the things we have to wrestle with in the legislature. And it hasn't been on the agenda in past years. It's a little fix here, it's a adjustment here. No. This has to be globally attacked in terms of legislation.
Dr. Butler, one of the things
what we saw on yes.
One of the things that I wanted to kind of chime in on that's really been heavy on my heart, and that is, how do we explain what we saw on TV to our young children, to our young Black children? We heard report after reporter saying to us, this is not who we are. This is not who we are. But from our lens, this is who America has been forever and a day. And if you're 10 years old or younger, for the last 10 years, that's all you know. You haven't been any other place in this American society that shows you anything differently. So now we are scarring another generation of children. First it was with Jim Crow, then it was with segregation, and now it's with this tolerance for white supremacy. Our Black kids who watch what we watched on TV, we need to be concerned about their mental state going forward. This is why I say this is very, very severe. And we cannot take this lightly. Insurrection, sedition, treason. We got to call things by their right name. Confucius said, if you want to get at truth, call things by their right names. This is what we have to repeatedly say. This was an attempted coup led by the sitting president of the United States. And as a result, we should take the full force of the law and deal with him and those who were complicit with him, including the Grahams of the world, Ted Cruz and Holly. We have to also hold them responsible. This didn't just start. If they would have done what they were supposed to have done in the first impeachment trial, we would not be here today. And now we see cabinet member after cabinet member talking about resigning or resigning. That holds absolutely no sway with me, because they tolerated this for 4 years, and now they're either doing one or two things, trying to save their own face or do not want to be a part of any movement around the 25th Amendment. So the fact that you are resigning when you've crippled the education department, Ms. DeVoe, I have no respect for that at all. So we need to put things in the right perspective.
White folks got attacked in the cabinet, in the Capitol building. It wasn't enough that we've been attacked for 400 years. It was when white folks who predominate our House of Representatives and our Senate were attacked. That's why they resigned.
So and that was a question I wanted to get to, is like, how do we start making change? Because this is ingrained in these white supremacists. It is white privileges at the ultimate. And we're seeing, and now white folks are really waking up. Oh, we really do have white privileges. And they're trying to deny what occurred and rewrite history. We all witnessed our own eyes. And they're up on Capitol Hill, and you hear all these pundits on TV trying to rewrite history right in front of us and act like this didn't exist, it didn't occur, and it would be. And I want to get back to Kelly O'Connor's with her. I want to get back this at the very end, because talking about what she said. They were good police officers. They were doing we commend them for doing their job. So they're already trying to deny what occurred. How can we? And I want you guys all just really give me some feedback on this, because I want our audience to start looking to see what we can do. What can we do in the community, and how can we change what has happened over centuries and decades and hundreds of years? And it has been okay. Where do we start? And how can we change it?
Let me respond very quickly. What you're saying, and we started out talking about the Black agenda, going back again to the introduction in 1972, it says the Black agenda assumes that no truly basic change for our benefit takes place in Black or white America unless we Black people organize to initiate that change. And I think that's the answer, that we must do what we have to do for ourselves. We can't depend on the white folks.
Well, I think that we first start by picking and choosing who we elect. The honorable legislature who's on this panel today, we need about 10, 15, 20 more like her. And yes, we in Georgia, you think about what happened in Georgia, it really is because of, as the judge said, women, but Stacey Abrams and what she has done because of the suppression that was taking place in Georgia. So what can we do in Georgia? In 2 years, we need to elect her as our governor. There are people on the ground. I'm thinking Shirley James is on the call tonight. I know Savannah turned for Onsoff and Warnoff because of people like Shirley James, Edna Jackson. So what we have to do is to make sure that we know who we're putting in office. We can't elect people who are not going to represent our interests. That's the first thing that is actionable.
I agree with that 100%. And we've got to replicate in Georgia what happened in Georgia all over the country. We've got to replicate it in Baltimore City. We got to replicate it in Prince George's County. We got to replicate it on the eastern shore of Maryland, where where thousands of black people reside. In southern Maryland, we've got to replicate it. And already it's starting, but we have to accelerate it because we have a gubernatorial election that's coming up in 2 years in Maryland. And we have several really well-qualified black people who are poised to get elected. But we've got to start working on that right away, just like what you said in Georgia, Doctor. This has to be done all over the country. It's called Black Power.
And something you said just then kind of resonates with me too. You're saying there are several qualified black folk to run. Well, we have to make sure that it's not going to be a repeat of what happened in Baltimore. I think it was in 1972. We need to rally around a consensus candidate so they won't split the vote and we don't get who we need to be into the office there in Baltimore and in Maryland or even in Georgia. Yeah. But we got to get the grassroots organized in such a way that we know who we're going to support, who we're going to rally behind, and hold truth to that. I would love to hear from our legislature. She's in the hot seat right now and doing a great job over in Maryland. I would like to hear her talk about this from a broader perspective of what can be replicated across the country.
Absolutely. I think it just cannot be underscored enough that why we are here right now and having this conversation is because we as a country, maybe not us individually, but we as a country elected this demagogue to the presidency. And so elections have consequences, as they say. And I think that we have seen that reverberated over and over and over again. So let that be one of our strongest lessons. And I absolutely want to get back to the Black agenda that the Invisible Man has mentioned. I am so inspired by what has taken place in Georgia. And I think that should be part of the fuel that drives us when we look at policy change. Georgia not only came through for our country, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Georgia. And it really shows us what relentless organizing can do. The people who I see making change in Maryland, who are able to move issues, and I'm talking about advocates and various types of leaders, are the people who are organizing and who are relentless. And so I think that those are some of the keys in terms of change. We have to be very clear about what our policy goals are and what our Black agenda is. One of the issues that I personally lead on and is just one of my greatest passions is around housing issues, and in particular renters. And all around the country, we are seeing so many people who are at risk of losing their homes right now because of financial issues around COVID-19. That's just one piece of the Black agenda. And we need to make sure that all of the pieces of the puzzle are identified and come together and that we are relentlessly organizing. And what just took place in Georgia shows us that it took years. That didn't just happen overnight where all of a sudden Georgia turned blue 3 times for us. But really having that focus, that long-term drive, and truly coming together and organizing, I think, are the things that we have just seen take place in a successful way. But it's that policy change that's so critical.
You know, we also have.
Now, you guys all know that
the good doctor said something that was very important. What are we going to say to our kids? Well, what are we going to say to white kids? What are we going to say to this country? And our story has been left out of all the history books. Our story has never been told accurately. What happened to the slaves stolen from Africa in this country has never been accurately conveyed to the white folks who stormed the Capitol. They are in complete ignorance, but so is the rest of the country. Black folks don't know our story anymore. There are huge numbers of Black people who don't know why. They see the what, but they don't know why, as Malcolm used to say. And so we've got to show them the why, which means in the legislature, we've got to make sure that we have a curriculum that accurately depicts what happened to Africans in this country who were stolen from Africa. And it has to be enshrined in every curriculum. Now, one of the things that the doctor will tell you is that because we get white money financing historically Black universities, is that there's a hesitancy to make Black history a required part of the curriculum. That's got to end. It has to be something that all of the incoming freshmen learn not just in one course, not in just 1 year. It has to be woven in to the fabric of the education that we get in the historical Black colleges and universities. The time to do that is now.
That is so true. And I want to actually let everybody know. I don't know if you're aware that they're having another rally right before the week of inauguration. So actually next week they're coming back again. And many of them haven't
They
left.
called it off, I believe. I think they called it off. That was in the
Oh,
in the Post today.
oh,
Yeah.
good. Because I know that they were organizing and they were going to be here the week of inauguration that weekend and coming in to wreak more havoc. So, how can we? I have two last questions, and then we'll wrap up because we have to finish by 8, and I had so many questions to ask, and sorry we didn't get to any of the calls, but I wanted to ask homegrown terrorists, and we're seeing this pop up. We know that there's a great, great potential after what we saw yesterday and what we keep seeing. And they don't, when they have all these shootings in the school and everything, they never call that a terrorist attack, but that is a terrorist attack. These homegrown terrorists are real. How can we prevent or identify, and what can we do to stop some of this from occurring? I
Dr.
mean,
Butler,
or can we?
I would like to respond to that.
Yes.
One, the police agencies and intelligence agencies and the Southern Poverty Center and many other organizations have told us for years that this was the greatest threat to this country. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say we shouldn't be surprised. The fact of the matter is that they had someone in the White House who gave them the signal that it's okay to even come out from behind the sheets. So as we look at this, it's not about trying to find out where they are. We know where they are. We just have to act on it. The other thing is that just because they said they're not coming to DC on Inauguration Day does not mean that they're going to be
correct
behind the doors and never come out again. We're going to have to be vigilant in terms of looking at our own communities because they will surface again. When you think about this now, and I have no issue about how people vote. That's what they're supposed to do in a democratic society. But when you look at the track record of this guy, 45, and over 75 million people voted for him anyway, why are people acting surprised about what he's doing when he's been the only person that's been true to form over the last 4 years? So my point is that we're going to have to do like the courts did some years ago with David Duke and the Ku Klux Klan. You're going to have to go after them in terms of where it hurts the most, and that's from an economic standpoint. Take their assets, take their money, take their belongings, and let them know that it's just like a RICO investigation rather, because you are organized and you're conspiratory. We have to take definitive actions against what we saw in the community. We don't have to look for where they are. FBI, CIA, and all the other Homeland Security folk already know who they are and what they're doing. We just have to act on it.
Yeah, but it's time, Dr. Silver, for a black person to be appointed to the head of the FBI. Because part of the reason that we have seen the reluctance to go after these domestic terrorists is because they are the same color as the people going after them. So it's time to ramp it up. And if we need to pressure Biden to appoint a black man to be the head of the FBI.
Well, I think
the head
whether that person is black or white, I think it has to be a person who's going to have the agenda of black folk at heart. You can have some people that might look like us and not be about us. But I do think that you got to have some integrity. So I think it was intentional as you began to look at who was appointed Attorney General. And as the Assemblyman legislative person on the panel tonight said, her former boss is the Assistant Attorney General. That's not by accident. That's by design. Yeah. And I do think we're going to see some different kinds of movement just based on the people that we saw appointed in the AG's office, both in the number 1 seat and the number 2 and 3 and 4 seats.
Very quickly, here's my last comment. The society we seek cannot come unless black people organize to advance its coming, and we must lift up the black agenda. It is our time. We must seize the time, for the time is ours.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I have one last round robin question I want to ask, and this is about persons of African descent. How do we prepare, if need be, if something similar like this happens again? How do we, as people of African descent, prepare for something like this if and when a similar incident happens again, and especially locally? And that's a round robin. I want each of you to please give that some thought and give closing remarks as we go in, and tell me, and answer that question.
First of all, we have to be ever vigilant, be aware of our own surroundings within our own community, know where the push buttons are, and we need to organize in the community to have a united front. I don't even know if I should say this on this platform, but the bottom line is that for my birthday present, my son gave me a .357 Magnum gun.
Man, you took the words right out of my mouth.
And he said, Dad, I don't want you out there without being protected.
Yes.
And I'm saying, whoa, this is my son. And he's saying, I want you protected, because he said they are armed and they are dangerous. And I'm not saying that I know you well enough to know that you're not going to go out there and start anything, but I want you protected. And we are going to have to protect our communities. We have to protect our children. We're going to have to protect our black children and our white children and our brown children. We just cannot let our community be taken over by this radical group. We have to understand that all black folk aren't with us. I've seen YouTube's presentation of black folk who would love Trump to death. But we have white folk who are with us 100%. And we can't ignore that. We have Jewish folk who are with us 100%. Absolutely. What I'm simply saying is, yes, we should have a black agenda, and it should be about us and for us. But if well-meaning people want to join and they are sincere, then my position is all people come, as long as the agenda is our agenda.
And by the way, black folks need allies. We're 13% of the population.
That's my point.
And we've got to have strong alliances with Latinos. We can't be bickering with them over things. We've got to have strong alliances with women. We can't be bickering about that. We're much stronger, the three groups together, if we work together, like we do in the Congress, like we do in the legislature. And so we have to constantly get the help we need to become stronger and stronger. And we do that by being willing to be there for other people's agendas as well. So we have to be on time on the immigration issue so that we can help the Latino community capture its full measure of citizenship. We've got to be on time with women to make sure that they're not victims of domestic violence, and that they are encouraged to fully participate in our society the same as the men do. So we have to reach out. And when we reach out, we're stronger. That's how we got our first black Speaker of the House. We reached out. We made alliances. We have to stop being insular. It's not just about us. It's about a whole lot of other people, too. And we've got to bleed for them as well.
Thank you. Janelle, I want you to give the last words on this question.
Absolutely. Yes, as a legislator who will be at our state capitol pretty often starting next week, this is something that is at the top of my mind. I think that we have to be prepared. We can't be caught flat-footed or think that just because this is Maryland and Maryland tends to go blue, for example, that this can't happen, because I have colleagues who were at the rally and getting buses put together to be at that rally. So I think preparedness is absolutely critical, but we also have to take care of each other. You may remember, I think this was around April 2020, so it was many months ago, but the Ohio State Capitol was taken over by militia. And there was an iconic photo. It was a young Black woman legislator who, much like myself, who was walking, and there was literally armed Black men walking with her to protect her from this militia. And so I think that we have to find different ways. I'm not saying come to the Capitol, especially not Annapolis, with your guns, but what I am saying is that, to the points earlier made, that we have to identify ways to protect each other and come together as a community. Right. And so we will learn the lessons from this, and again, use this to fuel policy change and an agenda for Black people.
Well, I am going to thank all of my panelists. This has been a very inspirational night for me, and I hope our audience has gotten something out of this as well. So we really have to think about that, really taking in home that Black agenda and build some consensus and build folks who support and think for us and like us. So we really we got a lot of work to do, a lot of work to do, but I think it's doable. I tell people that before I leave this earth, I want to be able to make it much better than how I've had it and how my grandparents and parents had it. I want to make it better for my future generation. And in order to do so, we do have to step up and we have to take charge of our own communities and ensure the safety of our communities and move forward together. And that's what we're really about. American African is about unity, and we have to come together. Somehow, some way, we got to do it. And I think Wednesday showed us, it showed the world that Black people in the United States are under siege. We're completely under siege. And it hurt me to see what happened and the difference in responses to the situation. Because if it was us, like Dr. Silver said, and many of you on the call, that we would have thought. We've been going to a lot of funerals right now. So I want to thank you so much, because no one else is really talking like we're talking today. If you've been watching the TV, you don't hear us really talking about what we talked about tonight. So I want to thank my audience again. I want to thank Afrique Today for allowing us this opportunity. I want to thank my co-host, Invisible Man, for keeping us on track. And again, I want to thank you. And I don't want this to be the end of our discussions, because we have to start having these dialogues. And Dr. Silver knows we've been working on this. And I want to thank you again, all of my guests, for coming on. And Janelle, thank you for being on our show for the first time. And I do want you on again, Janelle, because we have to start the dialogue discussion, and we have to empower our community with action steps where they can actually do for our communities and come together. We have to give them some type of steps to move forward. So I want to thank you all for this opportunity to come together today. But I do want to have this, I want to continue some of these dialogues. And I want to think about some action steps, because we got to think about how we move from here now. This is an opportunity, what we saw on Wednesday, and it's an opportunity for us as people of color, as Black folks, as people of African descent, as ADOS, whatever we want to call ourselves. It's opportunity for us to be one.
That's
and we
right.
need to do that. So I want to thank you again, and thank you, Afrique Today. Thank all my viewers. It's been a pleasure. It's been a great new year. It's been a crazy new year with what happened on Wednesday. But I'm excited about January 20th.
Dr. Butler.
Excited, and
Doc-
that's my
Doc-
birthday, so I'm getting a good present for my
Dr.
birthday.
Butler, I just
Yes.
wanted to say one thing before we go. You never say anything about the efforts that you do abroad. And so we do need somebody to contribute, because we do need help. So it's
Yes.
called Gap Busters. All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you for putting a shout out there for Gap Busters. Yes, and Gap Busters International in Ghana.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we are trying to bridge that gap and bring us together cross continent. And Dr. Silver is also a Pan Africanism,
That's
and I want
right.
to thank him for all he does. And we're gonna keep it going, because we're gonna need our support from our brothers and sisters in the motherland.
Yes,
Thank you
ma'am.
again, and thank Africa Today. And please Watch us next Friday, 7 o'clock. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Butler.
Thank you.